Good morning. Today I'm going to read Chapter 2, The Magic Treehouse, The Leprechaun in Late Winter. And I just wanted to remind you of some of the things that we have talked about in the past, right? Remember to visualize. So visualize means to create pictures in your head, kind of like a movie. Try to make connections, all right? Connect it with your own life if you can, or maybe another book, other similarities to a situation, to an event. Make predictions, what you think will happen next. Have I wonders. Oh, I wonder what the character will do next. I wonder why the character did that. I wonder why the author mentioned that. So have I wonders. And then vocabulary. What is the juicy vocabulary did the author use? Think of your shades of, meaning. Did the author use figurative language to make a point, or is there any vocabulary that you don't understand, okay? So be thinking about those things. All right, Chapter 2. The cold wind blew rain into the treehouse. Jack shivered. He was wearing an old overcoat and ragged trousers. Annie wore a scarf, a shawl, and a long red wool dress. They both wore scuffed, worn boots. "So where are we?" said Jack. He asked. He and Annie looked out the window. The tree house had landed in a tree at the edge of the green meadow dotted with woolly white sheep. Next to the meadow was a narrow lane. It ran uphill between low stone walls. Through the drizzle, Jack could see semi-mist-covered mountains in the distance and a flash of silver sea. "It looks like a scene in a fairy tale," said Annie. "Yeah, a fairy tale with bad weather," said Jack. "I wonder where the big house is," said Annie. "I don't know, but I'd like to get inside it now," said Jack. "Me too," said Annie, shivering. "Let's go." Jack crammed his cold hands into his pockets of his torn coat. In one pocket he felt his notebook and pencil. In the other he felt the Irish whistle. "I've got the whistle," he said. "Good," said Annie. She held her red skirt and started down the rope ladder. Jack climbed down after her. Annie pulled her shawl tightly around her shoulders. Jack turned up the collar of his coat. As they tramped through the wet meadow, he felt cold water seeping through holes in his boots. Jack and Annie climbed over a stone wall onto the muddy lane. The horse-drawn wagon was rattling toward them down a hill. The wagon was filled with squealing pigs. "Excuse me," Annie called to the driver. "Can you tell me where the big house is?" An old man with a tired, rugged face pointed back up the hill. "Thanks," said Jack. The large wooden wheels of the wagon rumbled past, splashing Jack and Annie with mud. "Yuck," said Annie. "Now we're cold, wet, and dirty," said Jack. "Yeah, we're going to look great." Oops. "We're going to look great when we get to the big house," said Annie. "So what do we do when we get there?" asked Jack. "When we find Augusta, maybe we tell her that Teddy and Kathleen sent us," said Annie, "like we told Louis Armstrong in New Orleans." Just thinking about their adventure with Louis Armstrong made Jack smile. "I don't know if that will work," he said. "His world seems so different from this world. There it is, so noisy and busy. Here it feels so lonely." "Well, we won't know until we find Augusta and Annie. Let's go." Now, remember the time frame when we talked about this, right? So the author's showing that he had wagon wheels, right? He's not driving a regular car like he would today. Jack and Annie lowered their heads. They plodded up the lane, sloshing in and out of giant puddles. When they reached the top of the hill, they stopped. The muddy lane wound down, past more sheep meadows and some cottages, past a long stable and several barns. At the end of the lane was a large open gate that led to the grounds of a white mansion. Gray smoke rose from the mansion's chimneys. "The big house," said Annie. "Maybe the people who live there will invite us inside to get warm and dry by a fire," said Jack. Jack and Annie started down the lane. As they passed the sheep meadows, Black and white dogs barked at them. When they walked by several boys hauling wet hay, the workers looked up and eyed them suspiciously. Jack was relieved to get to the gate and headed toward the big house. When they reached the front door, Annie lifted the heavy knocker and let it drop. A moment later, the door opened. A pale teenage girl looked out. "Who are you? Why are you here?" "Oh, well," started Jack. "Are you the ones the butler sent for?" the girl asked. "The butler?" said Jack. "Yes, we are," said Annie. "Then you should go around the back," the girl said. Before Jackie could ask for Augusta, the girl slammed the door in their faces. "Nice," said Jack. "I hope she wasn't Augusta," said Annie. "Why did you tell her yes?" asked Jack. "It was a way to get inside the big house," said Annie. "Come on." Jack and Annie tramped through the mud to the back of the mansion. They stopped at the door beneath the large smoking chimney. Annie knocked again. This time, a young, red-haired girl in a cap and apron opened the door. "Yes," she said. "Is your name?" started Annie. "Who is it, Molly?" called from inside. "Molly." So she's not Augusta, thought Jack. "Who are you?" Molly asked them. "We're the ones the butler sent for," said Annie. "You?" said Molly. She looked doubtful. "Well, come in and see then." Jack and Annie stepped inside. "He's in the kitchen," said Molly. She started down the hall. Jack and Annie followed Molly to the doorway of the dimly lit kitchen. The kitchen smelled of fish and onions. Pots and pans hung from a long rack over a big wooden table. A stout older woman was bent over the table, rolling out dough. "Cook, here are the ones that the butler sent for," said Molly. The cook looked up from her dough and squinted at Jack and Annie. "You're the ones he sent for?" she asked. Yes, ma'am, that's us," said Annie. The cook turned toward the fireplace next to the fire. An ancient-looking man with white whiskers sat slumped in his chair, snoring. "Mr. O'Leary!" The old man jerked and opened his eyes. "The ones you sent for are here," the cook shouted, as the men were hard of hearing. The groggy butler peered at Jack and Annie. "I sent for you," he growled. "Not possible. I sent for a coach driver and a blacksmith." "Really?" said Annie. "Well, I guess there was some mistake. But maybe there's some other jobs we could do around here." "Well, what are you good for?" asked the butler. "What do you mean?" said Jack. "Do you know how to sweep the inside of a chimney?" said the old man. No," said Jack. "Pluck a chicken?" the cook asked. "No way," said Annie. "What about rats?" the butler said. "What about them?" asked Jack. "They're all over the cellar," said the cook. "Can you catch 'em?" "I don't think so," said Jack. "Then you're no good for us here," snorted the butler. "Be on your way." At that moment, Jack heard the back door open and shut. A girl about Jack's age stepped into the kitchen. She wore a red cape and carried 2 large empty baskets. Her wet hair was parted neatly down the middle and pulled into a tight bun in the back. "Ah," said the cook. "Welcome back, Miss Augusta." And that is the end of chapter 2. So I heard some good vocabulary in here, interesting vocabulary, some that you might not even be sure of. So be thinking, do you have any I wonders? I have some I wonders. How about predictions? What do you think is going to happen? All right, we'll talk a little bit more soon.